What's up, degenerates? This is Locked In. I'm your host, Mason Cameron at PFF_Mace on the Twitter. And with me, as always, my partner in crime, Vishaal Gupta at Vishaal_Gupta95 on Twitter. V, it's week 12. We have a good slate of games. We're coming off of a really good slate of games. A lot of fun. Some Titans fell last week. We've got some good action on the slate this week. How you doing? How you living?
Doing pretty good. Great slate last week, and like you said, an actual Titans team fell, so we can throw them in there as well, like we normally do this season. But it should be another fun weekend this week. I think we have a lot of teams on bye this week, but there's still a bunch of good matchups. So definitely looking forward to getting into it.
Yeah, a lot of teams on bye this week, and I think nobody on bye next week, and then a lot of teams on bye the week after, which is kind of a little oddity to the schedule. I don't know that maybe they do that typically, but I was super confused looking at bye weeks the other week. But we started off the week with a really, really good game, and I actually have to share my screen here 2 weeks in a row. I've forgotten to share my screen, V. This is already going off the rails. That's okay, though. We had a crazy game. A little bit of a barn burner at the end that I don't think any of us were suspecting. Glitchy, what's up? How you doing, Glitchy? How's your night been going? We have a good slate to break down here. And V, I don't know that I expected it from this game. I'm not going to lie. When I wrote up a little bit of this game over on PFF early in the week, I alluded to that this could potentially be a trap game for Pittsburgh if they looked past Cleveland into their really tough schedule moving forward. And it didn't feel like they quite looked past them, but the weather was obviously a mess, and it was not a pretty game. So in this one, Pittsburgh 19, Cleveland 24. Pittsburgh was 3.5-point road favorites here, which, honestly, when we get Pittsburgh in this position, a lot of times we do take them. And because this was a little bit of an earlier game, sometimes they're not quite on our radar as much. But this is one of those that didn't quite turn out in their favor. 37 points on the game total. Cleveland obviously win straight up as home dogs. Over on the 37 points. And that came because of an insane fourth quarter. 27 total points. I'm just watching this thing play out and going, there's no way that they catch up after this. And then all of a sudden, what do you know? Pittsburgh's back in it, and then Cleveland's back in it. Who doesn't love a good snow game? So Cleveland up 18-6 in the fourth quarter. Pittsburgh answers back with a pair of touchdowns to take the lead, and then Jameis comes back, orchestrates the game-winning drive, just as Jameis always does. And, what an oddity. It was such a strange game. At one point, they took Russell Wilson out. Justin Fields was on the field, and he led a touchdown drive. 3 second half turnovers for Cleveland, and they still find a way to win this game. When it snows out there, the weirdest stuff starts to happen. V, what did you make of this matchup and how it turned out?
This is an absolutely brutal game to watch for the first three quarters, and I really wasn't expecting anything different going into the fourth quarter than just all of a sudden it exploded into a absolute shootout. Just a horrific beat for anybody who had the under on that game yesterday. It got completely blown apart in the last few minutes of that fourth quarter. Just crazy stuff left and right. I don't think there's a whole lot to take away from this game because, again, the conditions were just out of control. So I don't think there's anything really to extrapolate or project down the line based on what happened last night. But, kudos to the Browns for pulling that one out. Great to see them show fight and show heart despite having, a lost season as it is so far. So good for them. For Pittsburgh, defensively, I still think they're really, really good. You saw what they can still do with the pass rush, even with Alex Highsmith out. Nick Herbig has a huge fourth quarter strip sack of Jameis Winston to get them back in the game. So still feel really good about their defense. Offensively, they definitely still have some things to figure out. I mean, I don't think I'm at a point right now where I'm overly concerned, but they're gonna have to start putting some things together. They have a big matchup next week going to Cincinnati against not very good Cincinnati defense. So that's the game where we really need to see this Pittsburgh offense take a step, and then I think we'll be a little bit more comfortable with them heading into the playoffs. But overall, super enjoyable fourth quarter. Always fun to have a snow game in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. And you alluded to it. something that we have to understand about their offense is they really haven't been overly productive, and this is kind of an outlier number for them, particularly just, I mean, in the Deshaun Watson time, and now with, Jameis Winston, it hasn't been that much better, but they have looked moderately improved, and part of that has been a guy like Jerry Jeudy, who
Yeah.
on a week to week basis, you can get his lines fairly low. This week, you could get him about 45 and a half yards. I took the over on that one, just thinking he's going to get a lot of volume there. And I won't lie, I was sweating it for the first 3 quarters as he only had like 3 for 36, and it wasn't looking too pretty because nobody could throw the ball. But then all of a sudden, they popped off in the fourth quarter and were throwing it all over the place. And he ended up with, I think, 6 for 85. So when we do look into some of these games, those can be some of the targets that you take, because just because they don't have anybody overly talented that's going to scare defenses doesn't mean they don't have to get the ball to anybody. Somebody does have to get the ball. Somebody is going to get their production, and they're not necessarily a net negative with Jameis Winston under center. He is the type of guy that isn't afraid to fit balls into small areas. Now he's going to make some boneheaded throws from time to time and some really weird ones, which he did last night too. And you can chalk that up to the weather to some degree, but it's not against his MO to make some weird plays, but he also fits some strange balls into some strangely small holes. So we definitely want to see that happen. And when you do, you can take some advantage on some guys like Jerry Jeudy. I know that Jason had a ton of questions in his start sits on Elijah Moore this week. So that's another name you can keep an eye out for. And then David Njoku, 5 targets. He had that one where was that him where he rolled over in the end zone for the 2-point conversion? Got slammed on
he had an insane catch on the 2-point conversion, but like 2
Yeah.
plays before that, he dropped a wide open touchdown. So
Yeah, he dropped a wide open touchdown
day
in there.
for him.
Yeah, it was super, super strange day. I thought he got crunched on that one. He like landed right on his head. I was like, that couldn't have felt good.
No, definitely
But
not.
anyway, so those are where you kind of want to target this team. And frankly, it's another highlight on something that we talk about a lot is when you get into some of these divisional games, like this is Cleveland's second, underdog cover against the AFC North. They beat Baltimore just a few weeks ago. So we definitely need to keep an eye out for them as they do play the Steelers again, I think in 2 weeks, a couple weeks from now. So something to keep an eye on as they move forward for sure. Trying to play spoiler to the rest of this division, who is really, really strong at the top. Glitchy had a trade. Let's check this out, Glitchy. I traded Amari Cooper for J.K. Dobbins, and then I traded Swift for Jaden Reed, and then I traded Demarcus Robinson for Jacoby Myers. What's your thoughts on all my trades? It is PPR. So the Amari Cooper thing is kind of like an injury concern too, so it's tough. I like Amari Cooper's talent and what they're going to do with him in Buffalo, but for the fantasy season and the remainder of the fantasy season, you could probably see them taking a more cautious approach to that. So I think it's not necessarily a terrible move to go and get J.K. Dobbins because you know what they're gonna try to do over there. So, and then Swift, not bad. I know we talked about the Swift thing last week, and of course, I think he did a pretty good job there. He kind of like swung on his high swing and sold him high because he had a good week, and then you could go and get Jaden Reed, who is a player that I think everybody's high on. I'm fairly high on him, especially when that offense can click over there in Green Bay. And then Demarcus Robinson for Jacoby Myers, I think is an upswing. I haven't really been too high on Demarcus Robinson, but I think that if you're trying to take a guy that's outside of Cooper Kupp or Puka Nakua, like there's just not a lot of targets. And like even in some of his targets, they're just a day late and a dollar short. And it feels like, oh man, if he had just gotten that one target right there, he would have had a really good day. But we can if ands or buts about a bunch of receivers or a bunch of players in the league, and just not going to change that. The volume's just not there. I'm not like the hugest on Jacoby Myers, but it is what it is. You could get worse players. But that's what my thoughts are on it. V, what are you thinking about that one?
I'd probably say I'm probably net neutral on most of these moves. I think Amari Cooper, there's just a lot of mouths to feed in Buffalo, especially when everyone gets healthy. It's just not going to be easy to find consistent targets there week in, week out. You like what J.K. Dobbins has done so far with the Chargers, although not super, I don't think it's great to see Hassan Haskins getting some of those goal line touches the last couple of weeks for the Chargers. If that trend continues, and I think you could definitely see a dip in value for for Dobbins, but if he can take those goal line carries back, it should be okay. You know, I don't know about the Swift for Jaden Reed trade just because, just like Buffalo, there's a lot of mouths to feed in Green Bay. You really don't know who's going to be the main target any given week. Last week it was Christian Watson.
Christian Watson, man.
Some weeks it's going to be Tucker Kraft. Some weeks it's going to be Romeo Dobbs. So it's like it's also very hit or miss. You're not going to feel great starting him any given week because he can give you, you know, a couple points, and then some other weeks he can give you 25 points. So going to be hit or miss. And then yeah, I think DeMarcus Robbins for Jacoby Myers is pretty net neutral.
Yeah, think of it. I traded a wide receiver 3 for a 1 or wide receiver 2 because Bowers is a top target. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to find playmakers.
That's not an offense though that can really sustain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a problem. Like he might be a wide receiver 2 in actual NFL terms, but in terms of fantasy terms, Myers isn't getting the targets to, you know, necessarily be considered a fantasy wide receiver 2.
Yeah, your kind of hope is to be that they're going to be behind a lot, which I mean they are. So it's tough because they are in a bad place right now. They're in a really, really tough spot in so many different places that, you know, it's really hard to rely on a lot of them, especially when you're getting down the stretch there. But not a terrible move. But I think you could definitely get some production out of there for sure. Good moves out there, Glitchy. All right. We're headed into the slate here. And full disclosure, you guys, you'll have to get into our Discord for a lot of my picks this week. I had a random family thing today that I forgot about. So I'm a little light on time, but that's okay. We have plenty to talk about. It's going to be a good day. There's some good games on the slate, some really interesting ones. And we actually start off. I have a sneeze brewing. We start off with an interesting one. In terms of against the spread production, these are two teams that have been very good against the spread. So we have Detroit heading into Indy to take on the Colts. Detroit here, -7.5 on the road. That's a pretty commanding spread. Game total on this one, anywhere between, it looks like ESPN's spotting it all the way down at 49.5, which we've already talked plenty about what you get out of ESPN sometimes at a more standard book, I would say, like DraftKings. This number is looking at about 50.5 points. And that's where you lie on this one, V. The game total here, 50.5. Which way are you leaning on that?
Yeah, I'm liking the over in this game at 50.5. And, you know, whenever Detroit is playing in a game this year, it's really hard not to take the over in that game. Their offense is just absolutely rolling right now. They've scored more than 40 points in 4 of their last 7 games. They've also scored 24 points in 7 straight games. They're going up against an Indy defense that just got ruled for 27 points against a bad Jets offense. So I think there's going to be no issues at all for Detroit in this one offensively. They should be able to break 30 points in this game relatively easily. The question is, can Indy do their part? And I think they probably only need to get to around 21, 22 points in this one for this game to hit the over. And I think they should be able to do it. I mean, Anthony Richardson looked so much better last week. It's probably the best game of his career so far that he had on the road against the Jets last week. Yeah,
it was the highest graded game of his career.
Doesn't surprise me. Even just looking at his, standard statistics, it was a great day. He had a career high 272 passing yards. He had a season high completion percentage of 66.7%. He was just doing everything as well as you could hope. He was hitting deep balls. He was hitting short balls, running when he needed to, and being effective while doing it. Did have one fumble, but otherwise, did a good job taking care of the football. Just looked a lot better. And then going up against a Detroit defense that's going to be without Alex Anzalone, who's a big piece in the middle for them at linebacker. So it's going to be an interesting matchup because, I think just looking at the statistics, Detroit's defense has been really, really good this year, but hard to know how much of that is like they're truly really good versus how much of it is their offense just steamrolls other teams and opposing offenses are down so much that they really can't get into what they're trying to do offensively. So it's interesting to see a storyline I'm going to be continuing to watch the rest of the season. But I think if we can continue to see even like 80, 90% of what Anthony Richardson did last week, Indy's offense should be able to have a nice productive day in this one. So definitely like the over at 50.5.
Yeah. Well, and it's part of what they do defensively is that they get these huge leads. And people thought without having Aiden Hutchinson, they were really going to take a step back because, they get these leads. They can pin their ears back and just rush and let this coverage play on the back end. They're not like terribly, terribly solid at corner, but they are absolutely out of this world at safety. Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch are the 2 top graded safeties in the NFL per PFF. And Ali McNeil, he's been playing really good in the interior. And then, the big trade for Zay Smith. Like, that's what you want. And it puts them into position to win games and just do what they do best. So they're already an incredibly productive offenses. They take these leads and then they hold on to them because they're built to last on defense like that. So I completely agree. And when you do see like the loss of Alec Anzalone, that's a tough blow there for them. But, and the Colts have been very good. Like, well, I shouldn't say very good, but they have been very good against the spread is actually probably what I should say. So when we talk about spread numbers too, with these 2 teams, these are the 2, well, there are 3 or 4 teams that are about 8-3 against the spread as Indy is, but Detroit being 8-2 against the spread is fantastic. And then those are the top 2 records against the spread or winning percentages against the spread in terms of so far throughout the NFL season. And when we go back and look, actually, the Lions' last dropped cover was week 10 against the Texans, where they won 26-23. They threw the 5 interceptions or whatever. They only missed out on that by like 1 point. And then
half a point. I think there's a 3.5 point spread.
3.5. Okay. Yeah. So you're literally right there from having, 7 to 8 straight covers. And I don't think that anybody should be afraid even of a situation like this necessarily, where you're like, oh, it's 7.5. It's on the road. Well, would you really be all that surprised if Anthony Richardson plays a good game and they still won by 10? Like, no, I probably wouldn't, which is why you would like to lean towards the game total here as well, which is why you're on the over 50.5. It's a really big number, but with how good Detroit has played offensively, they're good for 35 plus every single week. And with how improved we've seen with Indy, I think you can get just enough points out of them and more than enough points that I think you're going to have this be well in the bag. I don't think 50 is going to be much of an issue. Glitchy, as a Lions fan, he says, yes, sir, I'm a Lions fan. We'll probably lose, but hopefully we will win. I don't think they're going to lose. I think even just straight up, like, Vegas doesn't think they're going to lose either. They're minus 356 on the money line. Like, it would be insane if they were to lose. And I do not, are they unbeatable? No, but I just do not think that a team composed like the Colts right now is going to be that team that takes them down necessarily, if that makes sense. Let's see here. Glitchy says, do I play Commanders defense for 2 weeks? Week 12, Commanders play Dallas. In week 13, they play the Titans. Or I could play the Lions defense. Week 12, they play the Colts. Week 13, they play the Bears. I would probably do the Lions. Right, V?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was definitely going to say Washington for sure. These are
really.
I mean, look at the offenses they're playing against. Dallas's offense is horrifically bad, and Tennessee also really bad. They're just not maybe as bad as Cooper Rush, but they're not doing anything with Will Levis under center either in Tennessee. So I would be all in on Washington the next 2 weeks in terms of their defense.
Yeah, that's true. It's just tough because I don't feel like they've been like one of those top units, but obviously in terms of strength of schedule,
I agree.
I don't think you can get better than that. Like playing Dallas and playing the Titans. I mean, this also comes to something that we talk about a lot, where sometimes it's better to follow around bad teams than it is to like hit your wagon to a really good team.
We're gonna continue doing that later on in the show. I'm definitely going to continue hitting on Dallas. And when you played that Dallas offense, I mean, you look like the 85 Bears. They're that horrific.
They're that bad. So, yeah. No, I mean, I could definitely see it both ways. I think, well, the thing is like the Bears are improved, but I'm not sure that they've like fixed their problems. That's kind
definitely
of like,
not, no.
Yeah, that's kind of one of those things.
But
so
when you are playing defense, is one thing you do want is the ability to get turnovers. Chicago has not had a turnover offensively. Like Caleb has not thrown a pick since their London game in week 6. Yeah. So there's not a lot of turnover opportunities. Whereas when you're playing Will Levis, there's a turnover opportunity on every play.
Every time the game hits the fourth quarter, there's a turnover opportunity with Will Levis. So that is true as well. Oh, well, and I think, I don't know that they're getting Marshawn Lattimore back this week, are they?
They're not. He has already been ruled out
He's
for
already been
this
ruled
end of
out.
the
Yeah,
challenge.
that's what I excuse me. That's what I thought, but hopefully they can get him back next week, and they really need it because honestly, the biggest weakness in that on that team right now is Benjamin St-Juste. He is really, really struggling in coverage, and it's looking pretty bad in a lot of areas, unfortunately for them. So next game we have on the list here, though, New England at Miami. Miami 7-point favorites here. They've been taking home some pretty hefty spreads over the last couple of weeks. -7 here at home. Game total on this one 46.5. Which way are you leaning on this one, V?
Yeah, I'm liking New England to cover the 7 points. Just feels like few too many points in a divisional matchup. We'll start with New England's offense, which I think has looked significantly better with Drake May under center. He has looked surprisingly good the last few weeks since he has come into the starting lineup. In his 5 full starts, he has 3 games where he's completed more than 70% of his passes. Also has 2 games where he has a quarterback rating of over 100 in those games. So he's doing a really good job, doing a great job avoiding sacks despite the poor pass protection that he's dealing with. All these advanced metrics that you see online are showing New England is like bottom 1 or bottom 2 in terms of pass protection. Yet Drake May's efficiency and EPA per play is right in the middle or even slightly above average since he's been playing. So really good job by him. I think they're doing a better job moving the ball efficiently. Last week they only had 2 punts and they held the ball for 37 out of 60 minutes. So that's really impressive to see and a nice improvement that we're going to need to continue to see from New England because turnovers have been a big killer for them on offense. So if they can do a better job holding onto the football and continue sustaining drives, it's really going to go a long way for them to, not only help them cover these games, but maybe even play spoiler and win a couple of these games outright as we hit the final stretch of the season. This is definitely not going to be an easy game, though, for New England to cover or win or whatever it is in this game because Miami's offense also looking really good, especially since Tua came back. In the 4 games that he's been back, Miami has scored at least 23 points in all of them. He's completing over 71% of his passes in those games. But all those games have been close. They were all one-score games until last week where they kind of finally were able to get a blowout win. But even that game was relatively close until the final few minutes. It was a one-score game. Then Vegas had a crazy busted coverage play where Jonnu Smith was wide open. I think it was on a 4th down, too, that put Miami up double digits. Then Minshew had a turnover in their own territory that led to an easy field goal for Miami. But for most of that game, it was a relatively close score. So I think that's what's going to be happening in this game. It could be a backdoor cover or something like that. But either way, I expect this game to finish as a 1-possession game. One injury note for New England: Christian Gonzalez was added to the injury report with a hip injury today after practicing Wednesday and Thursday. So something to monitor. If he is out, then this will be even more difficult game for New England. But I still like them to cover the 7.
Yeah, and surprisingly, you go and look at New England's metrics over the last 4 games. They're 3-1 against the spread, and 2 of those are 6 or more. So that's one of those things that you definitely want to see out of a team. Now they were close; they didn't necessarily cover last week as a +4 at home against LA. But like you said, they didn't necessarily play the worst game that we've seen out of them. They're much improved offensively with Drake May under center. And he's just a guy that's making it happen, even though they're pretty limited in terms of playmakers around him. They're not too far off. And then, like you said, Miami, they're 3-0 against the spread over their last 3. But only that game against LV was a game as a favorite. And, +6 against Buffalo, roughly about +2 against LA. And they do cover those, but I don't know if we can. We've seen this all season long. Teams go and beat up on the Raiders, and we kind of think, oh, this team's back. And then they kind of stumble the next week. And I think that a team like we talk about in division, like New England, they're going to play them pretty tough. They've been playing well. I think 7 is just slightly too high for this game, particularly. I think you'd probably, and even 7.5, depending on where
Yeah, I
you're
was going to
shopping.
say,
If you
if
can
you could
get
shop around and get it at 7.5, that's huge for this
that,
game.
that would be absolutely huge. So I think that's definitely where you wouldn't want to go. If it starts to creep lower to like 6, You
Yeah, it's a
might,
little dicey at that spot.
it gets a little bit dicey, and that'll be something to monitor as it moves forward. But if you can get it at plus 7.5, I'm definitely gonna do it. And I mean, plus 7 is a good number too, especially since you get that push value on what should be a close game. On what should be a close game. Glitchy's going with the Commanders. I like it. I like it, Glitchy.
Good luck.
The next game on the schedule here, though, did I close out the last game? New England plus 7.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Done. Dallas. God, we love picking on Dallas. This is a game we're both in on, and it's an obscenely high spread, and I don't think either of us care. Dallas heading into Washington to take on the Commanders. Commanders on this one, minus 10 at home. Game total 45.5 points. What is there to say about Dallas right now? They don't look good. They can't run the ball. They're not really throwing the ball very well. They don't protect very well. They're not playing great on defense. It is a, what is the saying? It's a symphony of errors. Is that the saying?
Something like that, yeah.
It's not looking good right now. So, V, quite clearly, like I already alluded to, we are on the side of Washington at minus 10. What are you seeing in this one that has you so juiced for Washington? Or should I rather say so down on Dallas?
It's 100% being down on Dallas, no doubt about it. I'll tell you how bad the situation is for Dallas. Stephen Jones had to come out today and say that they were not interested in signing Daniel Jones because they believe in Cooper Rush and that he gives them the best chance to win games moving forward. If that doesn't tell you all you need to know about the state of the Dallas Cowboys, I don't know what will. Just a complete embarrassment right now. Or even if Dak Prescott was in there right now, I don't think it'd be any different of a story. This team is just playing horrific football right now. Since Prescott has been out, the Dallas Cowboys offense has scored a total of 16 points over their last 2 games. Cooper Rush is just not very good. Don't be surprised if you see Trey Lance out there sooner rather than later because they're going to have to find some way to jumpstart that offense or give them some sort of spark. Big issue. They still cannot run the football in Dallas. They have 7 games this year with less than 100 total rushing yards as a team, including each of the last 2 games with Cooper Rush under center. They also have a couple injuries that they're dealing with offensively. Jake Ferguson ruled out with a concussion already in this game. Zach Martin is doubtful after not practicing all week. So just more issues for them to deal with. And equally as frustrating for Dallas fans, I'm sure, is that their defense is also just not playing well at all right now. They've allowed 30 or more points in 4 of their last 5 games. They're allowing the second most points per game in the NFL, only behind Carolina. They're also allowing the second most rushing yards per game. This is a terrible team to allow rushing production against this Washington Commanders offense because if they can start running the ball with Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, and Jaden Daniels, it's over. You have zero chance of ever competing in that football game. We've seen it countless times this season. If they get that rushing attack going, you're not going to stop them. So easy double-digit win in this one. I got this one at minus 10.5. If you guys can find it to minus 10, even better. But I'm so confident in this pick that I'll take the half point and run with it because it's not going to be anywhere close to being a competitive game.
Just to put this into perspective, their average scoring margin last 2, 34-8. Like they 34-6 and then 34-10. Yeah. Like they are not doing anything right now. And you hit on it. They can't stop the run. They get absolutely eaten up on the ground, and it does not look pretty every single time. Mozzie Smith is floundering in the center of that defense, and the fact that they continue to still play him shows the ineptitude of what they're producing as a coaching staff, because you can't even find it in you to take the guy that you drafted so highly and just take your lumps and sit him on the bench. Because I'm sorry, I don't care who's behind him. It can't be worse than what they're getting right now in the interior. And it's actively losing them games. So there's really no clean way to put that. And it's unfortunate because there is a lot of dysfunction in this franchise. And while the meme is semi-funny because Cowboys fans are so widespread and, you know, the memes of, you know, them being delusional, you know, the internet's words, not mine. I love Cowboys fans. It's just, it's an unfortunate thing for them, and I don't think any fan base deserves it. And a lot of what's happening to them is ineptitude at the top.
Yeah.
You have their right now, the news in Dallas is who's going to be the next head coach and why Dion is going to be the next head coach and Shadur is going to be the next quarterback. And there are rumors like I read one which was fairly hilarious, which said Dion could take the Dallas job if they drafted Shadur. And it's like, you guys, they have to hire a coach before
in
the
January.
draft. They have to hire a coach before the draft. It doesn't work that way. And secondly, they haven't even fired the guy that they have yet. So what are we really talking about? And honestly, it just continues to be an embarrassment for the franchise with how they wheel this team week in and week out. Now, granted, it's really tough when you're already limited on talent and you lose your highest paid player and one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. It's going to be tough, but these issues didn't start in the last couple weeks. It has been all season long. They're looking at 5 straight losses, 5 straight dropped covers as underdogs. I'm not sure. The last 2 weeks, they were +7 at home. What is going to be the difference this week being on the road at +10.5? Frankly, nothing. Biggest spread of the week. I don't even think you have to worry about it. Go hammer it. It's going to be a blowout. So that's where I look at it. But anyway, that's why this is also one of the funny ones, V. Game total in this one is hard because one team can hit this game total by themselves.
That happened to me last week. I took the under in a Houston-Dallas game. It was like 42, and you felt really good about it because Dallas couldn't do anything. But then Cooper Rush fumbles the football, and Houston gets a strip sack for a touchdown, and it just destroys it for you. So you never know what can happen when Dallas plays football these days.
Exactly. Oh, it's a tough look. The next game on the list, another one after my own heart.
Yes.
How about them Broncos? Broncos on the road, heading into Vegas. They are -5.5 road favorites. Game total on this one, roughly about 41 points. It looks like it kind of differs in some places depending on where you're shopping. So make sure you guys are shopping around. And V, you are on the game total on this one. And you know what? I like a little sprinkle in here on the away favorites in the Broncos, baby. -5.5, not afraid of it. Like we've talked about, there is a lot of teams that go in and beat up on Vegas and look like they produce their best game. And I expect this to probably be another one, as the Broncos have been really clicking on both sides. Bo Nix is playing really well. The defense still performing really, really well. I just don't know what to say. I'm a little bit flabbergasted because I frankly didn't expect this from this team. And all of a sudden they're pushing and they're going to potentially be a playoff contender here. And I would almost be surprised if they didn't necessarily make the playoffs, as it's looking pretty good so far. But V, you are on the game total on this one. What are you seeing with this?
Yeah, I am liking the over in this game at over 41. You just have to, the bulk of this conversation is going to be Denver's offense and what Bo Nix is doing right now. He's been on a roll since their week 4 game against the Jets. That was that awful rainy 10-9 football game the Broncos eked out. Since then, Bo Nix has been on an absolute roll. 13 passing touchdowns, just 2 interceptions. During that span, he has 4 games with a quarterback rating over 115. Their offense has scored 22 or more in 3 of their last 4 games. And in their last game against the Raiders earlier this year, they scored 34 points, going up against a Vegas defense that is just as bad now as they were in their first meeting. Vegas has allowed 32 or more points in 4 of their last 6 games. They're allowing the 4th most points per game in the NFL at 28.5. So no concerns for Denver's offense in this one. Vegas also dealing with some injuries in their secondary. Cornerbacks Shakorian Bennett and Nate Hobbs have already been ruled out. So a tough task is going to get even harder for Vegas's offense. Obviously they're not good, but I think they've been serviceable the last couple of weeks in terms of putting up points. They've scored 19 or more points in 3 straight games. To be honest, they should really only need to get to, between 14 and 17 points in this game for this game total to hit the over, because Denver's offense should be able to score in the high 20s, low 30s, at least in this game. So shouldn't be a very difficult over in this one at such a low number at 41. So definitely liking the over. Mason, please tell me how much of your net worth you have put on Bo Nix's offensive rookie of the year pick.
Literally so much. I
So much.
won't disclose how many shares I've went ahead and how many units I've gone ahead and saddled into that horse there. Frankly, it's just looking impressive. And I mean, I owe it to myself to pat myself on the back with this one with Bo. No, I'm just kidding. But big shout out to what they're doing over there. Frankly, it's an impressive feat. And while, it doesn't necessarily look great week in and week out, a couple weeks ago, they got absolutely pounded by Baltimore, and that's an unfortunate one. And that kind of sent questions. And you come out and you lose a close one with Kansas City, and it's tough because you come away with the L, but you come away with momentum because you really took the champs to the brink and almost handed them their first loss, which they went ahead and then parlayed into a loss the following week. So when you look at that, I think, sky's the limit for a team like this who's playing well with a young quarterback and, frankly, some players on offense that come out and perform when you really don't expect them to. Javonte Williams has been one who he finds his way into the end zone every so often, and they really do well in the red zone, and that's kind of a big piece to their success. And, you look up and all of a sudden they beat Atlanta 38-6 and really harass Kirk Cousins pretty much all day. And I don't know. It's one of these things that you really don't expect. And I don't want to look through this with orange covered glasses. When we look at their metrics in general, especially against the spread, they are 8-3. They are one of the best teams in the NFL against the spread. And those do not all come as underdogs. They won as a favorite last week. They won as a 13-point favorite against Carolina. They won as a road favorite against New Orleans. Now, those are lower tier opponents, but that's what you need to do as a good team against the spread is come out and beat the hell out of teams that you're supposed to beat the hell out of. And that's what they've been doing. We go back and look at the last time these two teams played, 34-18. Granted, Denver was at home, but it's one of those games that they really didn't do well. And to be frank, this was one of those games that they went between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, and it didn't look very pretty. But when you can't run the ball, you're really struggling throwing the ball. I'm really not sure what the Raiders are supposed to do in terms of taking down a team that is clicking as well as Denver has. And I don't want to go too far, but what Sean Payton and Bo Nix have been able to do, he got so much flack for being an older quarterback, but right now it's looking poised, and it's because Sean Payton and Bo Nix are on the same page, and they understand how this offense wants to operate and run, and he runs it within the system. It doesn't necessarily try to go too far outside of the system, but when he does, he can make those plays. And that's something that this team has lacked for so many years. I'm sorry, you guys. It's been so many years since we've had a great quarterback here. So I was just going to gush about it there for a second. But yes, V, to answer your question, I am shifting a lot of my focus for offensive rookie of the year to Bo Nix. And I think you can still get a pretty good value on it. I actually want to look at it here. I'm going to look this up here while we're talking about the next game. While I do that. So, next game on the list here, though, V, is another pretty good one. A little NFC matchup that always gets a little high strung. The San Francisco 49ers going into Green Bay to take on the Packers. Packers in this one, kind of in no man's land there, -5. I mean, it makes sense. San Francisco hasn't been that great against the spread. They dropped last week, but frankly, that was off some late game heroics. That we'll get into here in a second as well. Game total on this one, 44.5 points. V, you are on the side of the game total, but it looks like you might have gotten it a little bit early on a higher number. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about your take on where it is now, because it's clearly plummeted. But what were you looking at originally on this one? I have it written down as 47.5 was where you shopped and got it early on in the week, which, again, everybody highlights shopping early. Make sure you get in there.
Yeah, I'm liking the under in this game, and obviously the big news of the day. I don't know if you've seen it yet, Mason. Brock Purdy ruled out in this game with a right shoulder injury. That is why there's been such a big movement on both the game total and the spread. Initially, the spread opened in this game at like Green Bay -1. -1.5. That is very quickly obviously jumped up to -5.5 or -5 with the news of Brock Purdy, and the game total has dropped down 2 or 3 points since that announcement came out. But even at this number of 44.5, you definitely still like the under. Can you name the starting quarterback right now for San Francisco 49ers without Brock Purdy? Do you know that off the top of your head, Mason?
Is it Blaine?
It is not Blaine, but it does start with a B.
Who is it? Who's playing?
Brandon Allen.
Oh, it's Brandon Allen. Where's Blaine
Yes. You know when
Gabbert
the
at?
last time Brandon Allen took or made a pass attempt in the NFL during the regular season?
The couple years ago for the Rams, maybe?
It wasn't 2022, but it was for the Cincinnati Bengals. The last time he
Oh.
started a game was week 17 of the previous year in 2021. So we are coming up on close to 3 full years since the last time Brandon Allen has started. This game total way too high when you know Brandon Allen is starting a football game. This total should be closer to 40 if we're being honest. Like I said, Brandon
Arkansas alum
Allen.
Brandon Allen, right?
I don't know off the top of my head. That's a good fun fact for the viewers at
Sorry,
home.
that's
I don't know that.
sorry, that's for anybody who's a Hogs fan. Just got some PTS, some Brandon Allen PTSD. Hold on, let me just confirm this. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, all good. I was just gonna say I like this total even when it first opened up when we thought Purdy had a chance of playing at 47.5 because even when Purdy was in there, San Francisco's offense the last couple of weeks was not looking very good. They scored 23 or fewer points in 3 of their last 4 games, including less than 20 points in each of their last 2 games. They're going up against a Green Bay defense that is tied for 4th in takeaways and are allowing the 10th fewest points per game at 21.3. So this is going to be a tough game, even with Purdy in there. Now that you're moving to Brandon Allen, it's not going to look very pretty. On the flip side, for Green Bay's offense, they've kind of stalled out a little bit the last couple of weeks. They've scored 20 or fewer points in their last 2 games, despite having a bye week in between. They had that home loss to Detroit a couple of weeks ago where they lost 24-14. Had the bye week, then they come back last week. They win the game, but their offense didn't look all that great, only scoring 20 points against a Bears team that was not looking very good the few weeks before that. The main thing is just too many mistakes by Jordan Love. He has at least 1 interception in every game he has played this season. That's pretty hard to do. You're going up against a San Francisco defense that ranks in the top 10 in allowing the fewest passing yards per game and the fewest rushing yards per game. So, I think Green Bay should win this one pretty handily given the quarterback news, but I don't think it's going to be very pretty for either offense. So definitely liking the under, even at 44.5.
That's interesting development. I had not heard the news yet break about Brock Purdy not playing. That makes a lot of sense. That's a really interesting development. 5.5. I now completely understand 5.5 because of all of the things that you did say. Jordan Love has struggled a little bit, and it's one of those things that he kind of reverted to so he's still a very talented quarterback, but he does get himself into trouble by trying to fit some balls into places that he really shouldn't. And his turnover worthy play rate has kind of taken a tick up from the last, probably 6 to 8 weeks of last season into the first kind of 3, or when did he get hurt? First 2?
He got hurt the first game of the season, and
that
was the game against Philly, and then missed the next 2.
And then he missed the next 2, and then he came back, and he was decent, wasn't amazing, but he hasn't had that uptick. He had that uptick in turnover worthy play rate that we didn't see from him before in those final 6 to 8 games or whatever that made him one of the highest graded quarterbacks in the league over the last half of the season. So what we do need to see is him to approach these things a little bit more measured. And frankly, one of the things that is an asset to them this week is, I don't know, did Nick Bosa end up practicing today?
He also ruled out in this game.
He's also ruled out? Okay.
Yeah.
So what we see is that they're going to probably struggle a little bit in the pass rush. That kind of came back to bite them when he started getting a little, limpy towards the end of their last game. And then, you let Geno get some magic going. Man, Geno throws some balls, dude. He gets some. I watched that last drive, and because I didn't watch the game live, I was doing some work, and I had to go watch all 22. And when I got to the last drive, he had one where he stepped up, slipped a defender, and then fit that ball down the middle, right next to Fred Warner's hand, man.
Mhm.
And we've seen this dude stick balls out of the air. That was one of the ballsiest throws I've seen from the dude in a long, long time. So shout out to Gino for his fearless nature. I think he's going to be the quarterback there for a long, long time. So big shout out to that. But anyway, I definitely agree with you. Under on, you got it at the 47. So I don't think, what do you think about at 44?
Yeah, definitely still like it at the 44 number. Again, I would probably even take it down all the way down to 40. To be honest, I don't trust either
Especially,
offense right now.
yeah, and especially with, Brandon Allen. So that's so funny. So yes, it is Arkansas alumni Brandon Allen.
There you go.
As a longtime Hogs fan, we struggled with some of the decision making that he made, and then uh, for anybody who doesn't remember, he did play those games with the Rams, which is where I was remembering. Went to the Broncos, went to Cincinnati, which we were talking about. Now finds himself on San Francisco. I really didn't even know he was the backup there. I'll be completely honest. I
Yeah,
had
I
no
think it's
idea.
a little bit of a shock because they also have Josh Dobbs on the roster, so I guess he's the third string instead of the backup. So it's interesting that they played Brandon Allen over Dobbs, who had some nice moments last year, both Minnesota and Arizona last year.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting. Interesting. I guess we can't question Kyle though. Well,
No, for
I
sure.
mean, we will after anyway. We will after anyway. And then we get to one of my favorite matchups of the week. I'm not going to lie here. I love betting on the cards, man. I
Yeah,
really do like betting on the cards. They're a fun team to watch play football. Arizona, they are okay. So this is actually a really good point on this game. Shop around for this game, you guys.
yeah.
The two biggest sports books in the country have this game priced completely opposite. So what we're seeing is DraftKings, you can get +1 for Arizona. FanDuel, it's looking at +1.5 for Seattle. So make sure you go and shop around, get the points if you want the points, or you can shop in the money lines and see which way you're liking it leaning, no matter which team you're going with.
Mhm.
But we're leaning towards the Redbirds, baby. The
Yes, sir.
Cardinals, I like it. V, you are liking the Cardinals here. I know you got them at -1 as the line has moved a bunch. And as we talked about, we can all go shop around. But what is drawing you to this Cardinals team for this bet?
Yeah, they're just on a complete roll right now in Arizona. They've won 4 straight games and they've scored 28 or more in 3 consecutive games. Kyler Murray is playing really, really good football right now, doing a great job of not turning the ball over and taking care of the football. He's also just making a ton of high level throws, whether it's Trey McBride, Marvin Harrison Jr., whoever it is. He's making the right play every single time down the field. It seems like, and he only has 1 interception during their 4-game winning streak. So again, just playing really good football, doing everything you need out of a high level quarterback, somebody you paid a couple of years ago. He's doing everything you could ask for. The key, though, really, their rushing attack has been phenomenal for Arizona. They are 5th in the league in rushing yards per game, and they are 2nd in rushing yards per attempt. Now they're going up against a Seattle defense that is allowing the 6th most rushing yards per game. That, for me, is the key in this matchup. I think if Arizona, James Conner, Kyler Murray, and all those guys can get it going on the ground like they normally do, they should be able to win this football game. Seattle's offense, it's leaving a little bit to be desired right now, to be honest, given the amount of talent they have on that side of the football. They've scored 20 or fewer points in 3 straight games. It seems like they're constantly finding new ways to shoot themselves in the foot in all these games, whether it's just like consistently having bad snaps in key situations. I think it's happened in like 3 straight games where there's been a snap that's gone over Geno Smith's head, that's pushed them way behind the sticks. Or I think one of them was on a 4th and goal against Buffalo that ended that drive. Just really tough situations to find themselves in. They've been horrific on 3rd downs in their last 3 games. 11 for 35 on 3rd down in their last 3 games. That is less than 33% conversion rate. Really hard to win football games when you're not converting on 3rd downs and not being able to sustain drives. Gino is just playing a little too erratic right now. I know you talked about he looked nice on that final drive
Yeah.
last week, but prior to that, they only had 13 points in that game.
Yeah.
He just not playing consistent enough. 3 passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions in his last 3 games. Too many turnovers. Have to clean that up. The big thing for me is I'm not understanding why they're not using Kenneth Walker more. in the run game. It feels like anytime he touches the ball and gets a rushing attempt, he's doing something awesome with the football. But he has 14 or fewer carries in 4 of their last 5 games. He only has 2 games this season where he has hit 20 or more carries. It just doesn't seem to make a ton of sense to me. I don't know why you wouldn't want to get that guy the ball more often in the ground game. I don't know what the deal is there, but if they can figure out what to do with Kenneth Walker, they might have a better chance. But given the splits I'm seeing right now, I'm going to take Arizona.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. And you do make a good point. So the candid joke is that I have been super down on Gino for a lot of his career. And when he comes out and he makes gritty plays like that, but is also mixed with a lot of the boneheaded stuff that he has done, it's why it's not necessarily all on him because he does make gritty plays and puts them into position a lot of times. But it is the play calling, as you've said, for a lot of this season. I don't have the number right in front of me of who leads the NFL in dropbacks at this point, but for most weeks of this season, it was Geno Smith by quite a sizable margin too. So they just drop back and throw the ball a little bit too much. And I think I get it to a degree. They were hoping that they can get on the board early, get leads, and then let their defense kind of shine. But then their defense has kind of let them down in a lot of instances too. And that's not something you want to see with a team like Arizona coming in. Like you said, is running the ball very well. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that with Seattle. They just do not give K9 the ball. And it seems like every time he gets on the edge, it's 9 yards and some dude stiff armed into the turf. But we just don't see that enough from them. So I definitely agree with you there. And the other thing being is like Arizona's coming off bye right now. So they're rested and they look as good as they had all season in week 10 when they absolutely slapped the Jets. And we were all over that, telling you guys to bet that because frankly, they were just a better team than the Jets. And right now they're just a better team than Seattle. This is another one of those though, divisional game. When we talk about divisional games, they're always close, but that's why this game is so close as is. It's a pick 'em. And I think you're just going to want to pick the better team, not the team that's at home. So I completely agree with you.
Huge game for the NFC West standings too. Arizona's 1 game ahead of the other 3 teams. I think there's a realistic scenario where Arizona wins this game, and obviously that means Seattle loses. The Rams have a tough game against the Eagles on Sunday night, and then we already talked about San Francisco without Purdy going into Green Bay. I think there's a realistic scenario where Arizona goes 2 games ahead of the rest of the division after the weekend is all said and done. So huge playoff implications for the NFC West in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we talk about what they've done against the spread, they are 4-0 against the spread over the last 4 games. They're also one of the top performing teams against the spread. Another one of those teams that's in the 70% cover rate. They're 7-3 against the spread. Conversely, Seattle's just nowhere near that. They're 3-6-1 against the spread. It's not looked very pretty. They covered last week, obviously, because they outright won on the road as 6-point dogs. But the last game, the last 2 home games they had, absolutely slapped. They were home dogs and got absolutely wrecked. So, and granted, that came against LA and against Buffalo. And, we can talk about the Rams, a little bit of a resurgence there. We can talk about how good Buffalo is, but I don't think Arizona is that far off from a respectable team. And while their record might be 6-4, I think that they are one of the underachiever, or I shouldn't say underachievers. They're one of the overachievers in terms of what they've been able to do on the market. So I completely agree. And then to go back, so I think I got my Bo Nix shares at like 45.
That's pretty good.
But it looks like he's creeped up. He's at probably about plus 400 here.
Oh, interesting.
So if you guys are shopping, it literally looks like a 2, because I think he was like plus 800 or plus 1,000 like 2-3 weeks ago, and it's really just skyrocketed up as of recently in terms of pretty much every book. And I get it because Jaden Daniels has been fantastic. They have kind of slowed down though, and one of the things we talk about every single year in award voting, you guys, is narrative and momentum heading into the back half of the year feeds narrative, which will affect votes and how this award is decided. So another interesting week. And that wraps us though, V. That does it. Another good week in the book. Some good matchups. There's a lot more even. We have more to come in the Discord. So everybody, make sure you head over to importantnonsense.com. Become a member. That's how you get into our Discord. You can ask us any questions that you want about the bets you've got going, about what you're thinking, about anything that we're targeting for the week that we didn't talk about, as well as prime time picks. I know I've got a couple for this week. I know V's probably got a couple for this week because we got some good games. So it is going to be a good one. And that wraps us up for week 12. We're back same time next week, 8 p.m. Eastern. Oh, actually, no, we are not back same time next week. That is what we need to talk about. You guys, we will be back Wednesday next week before the holiday. We're going to be talking about some Thanksgiving football games. We're going to be talking about the Sunday slate. And is there one on Black Friday this year too?
There is. Yep.
So we're going to be talking about all the games. So we're probably going to have picks for a bunch of them. Come by, hang out, you kick it. We're going to make some money and be merry and jolly and every other thing that you do during the holiday. I might have my holidays mixed up. But anyway, V, do you have any parting words for the folks at home?
Yeah, just like you said, hop into the Discord chat. I'll have a pick for the Sunday night game this week. Nothing for the Monday night game. I was spending a lot of time trying to figure out which way I lean on that one in terms of the Harbaugh Bowl. Couldn't come up with anything I really like, so I'm just going to sit back and enjoy that one. Should be a fantastic football game. But if you have any questions on that game or whatever it is, come in there and ask us. And yeah, really looking forward to hanging out the day before Thanksgiving. Get away from your family a little bit before everybody hops into town and spend some time with us. Should be a fun time, and it should be a fun slate of games on Thursday and Friday to go over.
Yeah, it should be a good one. And until next time, everybody, good night, good luck.